In this episode, I am speaking with technology entrepreneur MG Gurbaxani. We will be discussing startups, leading teams, building great cultures, and beyond. If you are the founder of a tech company, or if you're thinking about starting a new venture, then this recording is a must watch. Welcome back to the podcast.
The Alfie Whattam podcast.
So you've lived in London, San Fran, France, Ohio, and India, and a few more.
Yeah, so I actually, first 5 years of my life was in the Middle East.
Okay.
But then also lived in Chicago, Scottsdale, Arizona, Montreal. I think those were the ones that you missed.
Okay. I feel like I've got a cultural diversity of opinions and thoughts living in the UK and then New Zealand, Australia, and spending some time in the East as well. But you have definitely beaten me from that perspective. Which is the place to be from like a tech point of view, do you think? Because everyone seems to say, you know, the valley, but a lot of people are saying it's kind of dying a bit with all the crime and everything that's happening there. Some people are saying the AI resurgence is bringing it back, but a lot of people are saying, look, you know, London, it's like the valley, but without the problems and sometimes without the capital there as well. What's your take on the place to be in tech right now?
So I spent 6 years in San Francisco in the early 2000s, and it was definitely the place to be then. And something beautiful about the Valley is that it is such a concentrated hub for venture capital, for tech founders, and it is, and my mind will always be the birthplace.
Yeah.
Why I think it's been so successful is really because of that tightly knit community.
Yeah.
And you have this remarkable ecosystem where your kids are going to school with kids from, and there's just this network where very quickly you're establishing a trust and reputation, and the compounding effect of that within one industry, to me, that's been a big factor for why tech grew so fast in the Valley. But I mean, today you see, even in the US, Boston and Austin and New York City.
Yeah. Facebook was, birthed in Boston.
Yeah, exactly. And you see the hubs in the US and now in Europe, London, Berlin, Stockholm, Prague, and Spotify. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So it's becoming more decentralized.
Yeah.
In my mind, access to capital, you're still seeing the big money in the Valley, in New York a lot more now. And to me, London is catching up and catching up fast. Part of what is on my wish list for London is this mindset change that needs to happen on the capital access side. And today, a lot of the investment and firms that are calling themselves venture capital, they're still private equity, banker type mentality.
Yeah.
And haven't quite, you look at the term sheets that you get from a UK based VC versus a US based.
Tiny, aren't they, in comparison? Yeah.
Well, tiny, and also it's when you really start getting into it, it's like, all right, this is a banker mindset versus a founder mindset. And I think it is changing. It's changing slowly, but I am optimistic about the future of tech in Europe, especially. There's an interesting organization called Boardwave, which is, its mission is to create Silicon Valley in Europe. So the founder of Boardwave, a guy called Phil Robinson, he used to be the CMO at Salesforce, and his whole mission is, how can we create and replicate that similar network, similar ecosystem in Europe? Like, why not?
Yeah.
So I think the next decade could be very, very interesting for tech in Europe.
Yeah. On your website, and I want to quote this so I don't get it wrong.
Yeah.
It says that your company helps B2B software companies speak the language of value, which I thought was very poetic and nicely put. Can you explain kind of what that means and just tell everybody a little bit more about your business, just to give people context that are watching?
Yeah. So our new tagline is, stop talking features, start discovering value.
Okay.
And that is really a shift in thinking, especially for tech founders who build cool product. And they can't wait to tell you about their product and all the bells and whistles and features and functions. But if I'm the customer, I don't care. I care about what are the business outcomes that this solution is going to drive for me. And if you think about a salesperson who has to understand what 15, 20 different products and modules are doing, how they translate to a wide range of customer needs and priorities across industries and personas and maturities and sizes, as a salesperson, how am I going to create that value map of here's what the product does for this unique customer? And that's where the Kovama platform comes in.
Okay. But you originally didn't start as a platform, did you? You kind of built it as a consulting company?
Right.
And then
That's right.
Was it was MG Pricing?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then you pivoted. I'm not sure if you had another name in between, but then and now it's the platform. Why did you do the pivot out of interest? Why did you go from being like a service company to a tech product?
Yeah, so we were helping companies with their pricing.
Yeah.
And we would, as typical management consultancies, run workshops, get data, layer on external indices, benchmarks, and here's what your pricing and packaging lineup should look like.
Sure.
But what we realized more and more that much bigger problem than setting price was actually getting that price.
Okay.
So how do you enable salespeople to go out and communicate the value in the right way so that you can get the price that you deserve?
Okay.
And this problem became a bigger problem with SaaS and with the need for a recurring revenue model and a subscription that renews every year. So we started helping these same companies as consultants come up with the right value propositions that were unique to the different customer types. And we solved the same set of problems over and over as a consultancy till one day we were like, hey, is there a product angle here?
Yeah.
And the repeatability and the size of the problem and how fast the problem was growing, we jumped in and built tech a couple of years ago.
Okay. When you say a couple of years ago, how long have you had the company for?
So the consultancy started in 2017 and we wrote our first lines of code in 2021.
Okay, cool. So you've been on the founder journey for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
I'm about a year in myself.
Okay.
A lot of people watching, they've started companies, they're in the early stages, whether they're bootstrapping like I did or they've raised cash or whatever. What advice would you give to those people, or what advice would you give to yourself, like you speaking to you a few weeks into your venture? What insights would you share, like that you've learned over the past couple of years?
Wow.
Easy question to get us going.
Yeah. Well, lots of directions to take this. But someone described me as an accidental entrepreneur.
Okay.
So there was never I want to be the CEO of a tech platform company one day, and that's what I'm going to go and do and learn how to be an entrepreneur.
Okay.
It came more from you're living and breathing this problem day in and day out. You're recognizing it's a new problem. It's a growing problem. You're uniquely positioned to solve this problem.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was the impetus for why we built this business.
Okay.
We took a fair amount of time to validate the need, the willingness to pay, the market appetite before we went out and raised venture capital funding.
Yeah.
So we bootstrapped a long way ourselves.
Yeah.
We were using our consulting revenue business to fund the development of the product. And it was only when we started seeing real traction and getting customers who were signing up to subscription agreements, we said, okay, this is the time to go all in.
Okay.
So it was perhaps more deliberate and cautious than how a lot of other venture-backed or investor-backed companies start. In terms of lessons and advice, I think doing it alone is really hard. So finding the right co-founder, someone who really becomes like a spouse, a life partner with you, finding that individual early. In my case, Alex, my co-founder, and I, we had worked together for 10 years before this, so there were no surprises.
Yeah.
But it's not just on the founder side, it's also on the personal side. And my wife had to be fully bought into this. What was interesting was the push was often coming from her.
Sure.
And it was, hey, we're both in corporate jobs, corporate lives, predictable income stream, mortgage, kids, schools, all of that. Why change that? It's pretty happy. And there was a moment where she, who is also from software and she knows our space and industry quite well, and she said, just get the balls and do it.
Yeah.
Jump in.
Yeah.
And that was the conviction that helped getting started on this journey as well.
Yeah, the hardest part is just starting most of the time, and then it's just about momentum and keeping the ball rolling and getting it in the right location. Right?
Which is also hard, right?
Oh,
The momentum part.
Yeah.
I remember we got our first customer.
Yeah.
We were delighted.
Yeah.
And we said, right, let's build a pipeline. Let's go out and get more customers. And the time it took from customer number 1 to customer number 2 was 9 months.
Yeah.
It's like, well, hang on, did we get this all wrong? But then you start seeing, and that going from customer number 4 to 7 to 8 to 10, that started happening much faster. And that's when momentum started building. But there were definitely worries and concerns when that initial momentum wasn't building.
Hey, this podcast is brought to you by WeLoveAlpha.com. If you're looking to grow and hire and scale your software engineering team in the UK, then go to WeLoveAlpha.com to hire the best software developers on the market. Everything across Java to C# to PHP to Python to React and Angular and mobile and more. Go to WeLoveAlpha.com to hire the best software engineers in the UK now.
How did that make you feel, quitting a safe, corporate, well-paid job with kids, with a mortgage, and then you have months and months of no income? How did that make you feel from a stress perspective?
There was actually one moment where I had this old stamp collection that I was looking to liquidate because there hadn't been revenue coming in. But no, look, we had reserves in that we had consulting revenues that we had built up. We were doing about $1 million a year in consulting revenue, and we had planned for a while before software revenue would actually pick up to the point where it starts having an impact on your P&L. So the combination of that plus getting funding, the agreement between my co-founder and myself was, look, we have to maintain a certain living standard, and someone's got to pay the mortgage and someone's got to pay school fees. So there was a minimum baseline that we had agreed to, and that alleviated some of the ups and downs.
Yeah. Tell me about raising cash. Not the best time to do it, but when you did it, a bit of an interesting market, but still you successfully raised money and have used that to accelerate the growth and scale. Tell us about how you managed to get the cash, the process of going out there and creating a deck and contacting investors and the rejections inevitably along the way. Tell me about that journey.
So let me start by telling you some of the worst advice that I got.
Okay.
And our initial fundraising strategy was, let's get money from business angels.
Sure.
Executives in our space who understand the problem, who can guide us and advise us, potentially become future customers one day, but validate the need, and they see the need because they live the need. So it was, right, let's get angel checks as an initial way of getting started. And the worst advice I got was, MG, you need to go and tell a story that is so big and so visionary that they need to go home and tell their spouse about why they should put 50, 100 grand in Kuvama rather than a down payment on the holiday house.
Sure.
And that's what I went out and did.
Yeah.
And I got rejection after rejection after rejection. I was like, this is going to be hard.
Yeah.
And And then the best piece of advice that I got along the way was, MG, the right kind of investors, they're going to know. And rather than talking about a big grand vision, why don't you proactively talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Just brutal honesty with them. Here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's how we need your help.
Exactly.
Yeah, not selling the dream, selling the reality.
Selling the reality
Is how we get to the dream, though. Yeah.
Yeah. So demonstrating understanding of hey, there is a big vision. But then also when you say the good, the bad, and the ugly, you're over-indexing on the not so good stuff.
Yeah.
Which in my mind, and clearly from an investor perspective, it demonstrates maturity.
Yeah.
It preempts the really tough questions that they're going to ask. And if you do it right, you can turn it around to them and say, hey, here's the bad and the ugly. How are you going to help me with the bad and the ugly?
Yeah. You're taking the ammunition out of their gun before they get a chance to shoot it. And you're giving it back to them. And it's a great way of dealing with anything, not just pitching for money, but just sales in general. You know, here are all the main objections that you're going to have. And if you say them, they can't say them because you've already, pointed to the elephant in the room.
Yeah, and turning it around to them is like, hey, these are the objections we have.
Yeah.
How are you going to help?
Yeah.
Another great piece of advice that I got on early stage fundraising was when you think about a decision-making framework for bringing on investors. I mean, you might be in a scenario where, hey, you just take money, and that's very real. When someone's writing you a check, you just take it.
Yeah. Yep.
But if you have options, then you're looking to optimize for three things. What's the size of check they're going to write? How much value are they actually going to bring in terms of network, intros, advice?
Yeah.
And how much of a pain in the ass are they going to be?
Yeah, which is always there.
Which is always there.
Yeah.
Right? It's always there.
Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's this, Yeah.
So if they're going to write a large check and not bring a lot of value, that's okay.
Yeah.
If they're going to write a small check but be a pain in the ass, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So you're looking at optimizing for these three, which is such a simple tool, but you can even share this with potential investors and say, this is how I'm going to make decisions.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, leadership, because after you have cash, people use it to scale by people. They build a team. What's it been like for you, as a founder of a company where your people are responsible, their families, their lives, it's down to you at the end of the day, as a captain of the ship. What kind of advice would you give to people on that leadership journey? Maybe they're founders, maybe they've raised money, maybe they've built a team. How do they manage? How do they coach? How do they inspire? How do they get the best out of their people? What would you say to that?
Yeah, so in my mind, the first 4 or 5 hires, you have a very low appetite for making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
A wrong decision at that stage could sink the company.
Absolutely. The core team, it has to be.
It has to be, and you want folks who you've worked with in the past. There's no surprises. So I think there's a separate question of how you bring them on the bus.
Yeah.
Right. And those are people where you're planting seeds 6 months, 12 months, 18 months before there is actually the time. And you keep in touch and you talk about developments and you share progress so that when money's in the bank and there's time to pull a trigger, there's still conversations to be had, but it's not hey, I want you to quit your 200K job at this big company and come join me at a startup, right? It's bringing them along from the ride early on. Once you go beyond that and you're looking at employee number 10 and 12, that's when, again, you're not in a position where you can hire an executive recruitment agency or any kind of agency because you don't have the money to spend on that.
Yeah.
And you're looking for people who truly buy into the vision.
Yes.
And ones who are in it for the actual ups and downs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of romanticized stories about startups, and people who are interested have their LinkedIn feed bombarded by these great founder success stories. But hey, there's a lot of ones that didn't make it. And I think things have changed in a big way from 2023. Rewind the clock 2 years and everybody wanted to work for a startup. Now boring is the new sexy and you get your steady paycheck. But in that hiring process, in my mind, there's a lot of self-selection.
Yeah.
And the advice I would give to founders when they're bringing on their let's say, hires 6 through 12 is almost give them good reasons why they should not join. You need to understand where they are in life, what truly motivates them, their family stage, how they might cope with big downs, losses of momentum, losing clients, and understand whether they have that grit. And I think the reference calls, the network reputation, being able to validate and test all of that, again, really doing due diligence to the next level before you bring any of these employees on the bus.
I really like that, like almost telling people brutally about the challenges that they're going to face, so they don't enter the door and think they're sold a pipe dream. You know, they know what they're getting into.
That's exactly it. Yeah, we did something quite interesting.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual hiring process.
Okay.
Where we wrote a fairly personalized job description on LinkedIn, posted on LinkedIn.
Sure.
And we've done this a few times now, so I can put my hand up and say this worked.
Yeah.
Because we've had these strong 3-4 hires who've been with us over a year now. And what we did was we put up this job description and we got 300 applications. We're like, whoa, I don't have time to go through 300 applications.
No.
So very quickly shortlisted to about 40, which met hey, they worked in a startup before, they are from our space across marketing, sales, customer success. And the next step in the interview process was we share a lot. We tell them exactly where we are as a company. We send them almost a case study of where we are. This is what the product looks like, a demo of the product.
Okay.
Here's how we're looking at our customers, and a specific couple of questions that they need to respond in a 2-minute video.
Interesting. That's very rare that people do that as an interview process. So you sent that to 40 people.
We sent that to 40 people.
How many people replied?
Yeah, that's the right question. So it was, hey, there were folks at the company who said, MG, we haven't given them any time. We haven't really spoken to them. This is now asking for homework. They were like, so there were definitely 25% of those who responded back with bugger off, MG. Like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Which was great because those are the people that
you don't want them anyway.
You don't want them anyway.
Yeah.
But we got about a 60% response rate.
Wow, I did not expect that. That's great.
And what's remarkable is how quickly, with a 2-minute video recording, you can gauge chemistry.
Absolutely.
And you can tell, like, you know what, I just don't see myself ever being able to work with this person. Or yes, this person clicks. And we were able to shortlist from 24 to 6. And that's when we had 6 strong candidates and whittled that down. So it's a playbook now. That's how we do a lot of our hiring. But there was, and we definitely pissed off a few people, which we're okay with.
Yeah. I think that it's a really good thing to do because it shows two things. Firstly, you can tell 90% of the time if somebody's going to be a good fit for the company culturally, perhaps not technically, but culturally within those first couple of minutes, just based on communication, vibe, how you're getting on, etc., etc. So oftentimes the first stage, which is 60 minutes, after 5 minutes, the interview's been done. The final 55 minutes are a formality, really, so you don't look rude. So, you know, having something that's very brief is great from a time perspective. But the second thing is that proactive attitude. If somebody's willing to do that, they obviously want to work for you. They've obviously done a little bit of research. They obviously know what they're getting into. Whereas if somebody had to record a 2-minute video for every single application, you know, clearly it's just not going to work, right? But you separate yourself from everybody else by asking for something unique, if that makes sense.
Something unique, and also to the point you made, you want to get a good understanding of egos.
Oh, yeah.
Startups have no place for egos. So one of the other things that we did was, hey, there's no titles. There's no directors and VPs and SVPs. If you were a VP at your last company, that's great. But guess what? Over here, you're going to be just a function.
Sure.
And if you're looking for status, then you've come to the wrong place.
Yeah. Hey, really quick video just to give you a free subscription to Coder magazine. Coder is the #1 publication for all the latest tech news, expert insights, and exclusive industry interviews. With Coder, you get the inside scoop on what's happening with Elon Musk, with Bill Gates, with Jeff Bezos, with Mark Zuckerberg, and so much more. So if you work in the technology industry, then I'd highly recommend that you give Coder a read today. Just scan the QR code on the screen for free access now, or go to welovealpha.com/magazine to get your free subscription today. And that, I mean, I get that because I spent 5 years with a big corporate. You were at Microsoft and many other big businesses, right?
Yeah.
I've been through like trainee, associate, consultant, senior, lead, manager, I gone like national. You go through the thing and it's like, it's amazing in the moment, like, oh great, I've got this title. But then after you try entrepreneurship, you're like, you don't care at all about any of that. It's about how do I add value? How do I, how do I give more than I take in financial transaction, right? Did you have the same thinking when you went into startup land? Like those like days of chasing titles, did that kind of vanish a little bit? You know what I mean when I say that, right?
I do. So I feel fortunate to have worked for a couple of startups early in my career, especially one startup, which back in 2006, 7, 8, small company called Wrapped, where they had this culture. And it was everybody roll up their sleeves, get stuck in. There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
And the founders of that company, they went on to start. So that was a company that got acquired by Microsoft. So it was an interesting transition going from a 90-person company to a 90,000-person company overnight.
Yeah.
But the founders of that went on to start many great companies after that, big exits. They now have their own podcast called The Close Session.
No way.
And a lot of their thinking and their...
Wrapped, he says.
Wrapped. Yeah.
The Wrapped Mafia. Yeah.
Wrapped got acquired by Microsoft. Then they started Crux that got acquired by Salesforce. And then they started this venture studio. And they've got a portfolio of companies that are doing really well, all based in San Francisco.
Sure.
But a lot of what they learned and their hard lessons along the way, I've inherited some of that DNA, and especially in terms of company culture and creating that at Kovama, I had a lot of great advisors and mentors that helped.
Okay. I often find that the best way to get advice is from mentors in person, but if you can't do that, then get it from books, because if they've distilled 30 years of wisdom into 100 pages, then that's really beneficial for people that are trying to build new ventures. Are there any books which you would recommend, I guess, other entrepreneurs read and other founders that are beginning their journeys?
So The Founder's Dilemma.
Yeah.
I think it's Founder's Dilemmas. I think that is that's like a Bible, which
it's a textbook, right?
That is the textbook. But I spend more time with founders and learning from their experiences, than from books.
Yeah.
So one of my learnings has been, you can get a lot of advice. That advice is not necessarily good advice or bad advice categorically, but what you need to do when you receive that advice is reverse engineer it to why they're giving you that advice. What is the journey that they've been on? It might have been great advice for them at that point in time, but ultimately, and you asked the question about fundraising, it is so personal.
Yeah.
And similar with building a company, you can have lots of great advisors who can give you advice that's polar opposite. You need to unpack why they're giving you that advice and map your own trajectory from that. And I would say that applies to books as well.
Yeah.
There's books, I want to say 95% of founder playbooks will say, don't hire your first salesperson until you get to $1 million in ARR. Founders should be doing all of the selling.
Yeah, I'd probably say most business books teach that.
Yeah. And our experience was, founders can do all of the selling.
Yeah.
And my co-founder and I are still involved in almost every single deal.
Yeah.
But there is a perception when the founder CEO is showing up for the first meeting and you have a potential customer who says, we like what you do, but you guys are really early stage.
Sure.
So let's talk about a pilot. Let's talk about a proof of concept.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how much runway you have. Let's talk about business continuity. And all that vanishes if for your first meeting, you have an enterprise salesperson doing that prospecting, getting the meetings, and you come in at a later stage.
Yeah.
World of difference.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. What about, I guess, more in terms of time and family? A question that I'm asking off myself, really. You got 2 kids.
I do.
3 and 8.
That's right.
Right, okay.
That's right.
I got a 7-month-old boy. Okay, he was just starting to...
You look well rested, though, I must say.
Oh, well, I got a great wife, I suppose.
Well done.
I need to clip that and send it to her, don't I? if I ever get in trouble. But what advice would you give for time management for like parents trying to juggle the 2 of them? Because I found certainly in those first couple of months, oh my God, there's so much time that just got like swallowed out of my day every single day. Not even big things, but just like, hey, this takes 5 minutes, then you go and do this and that. And it's hard to get solid blocks of work done, which is how you do really deep, meaningful work, like without distractions, like focused. So how have you found building a company whilst, starting and building a family? How have you managed to, manage that from a time perspective?
Yeah, I'm still figuring that out. But breaking down the day, and something that I never thought I would say 8-10 years ago is I have truly become a morning person, and that 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. uninterrupted time where the house is still sleeping, I love that. Right? I love that, and I get real stuff done.
Okay.
The rest of the day and the week, there is almost a blending of work and life and family and personal, and it bleeds into each other a lot. And I don't think that necessarily works for everyone, but that work-life integration, if you will.
Yeah.
So
forget balance, go for integration.
yeah, just embrace the integration. And hey, if you can squeeze an hour out at 11 in the morning on a Wednesday to have a session of yoga, then do it.
Yeah.
Don't feel guilty about it being business hours, right? Do that. Find times. There will be long nights, there will be weekends, there will be times where you're taking away from family. So just that's how I've approached it.
That's cool. I feel like I needed to hear that. Yeah, no, I get you.
But what's also funny is my older daughter now, who's 8.
Yeah.
She's seen this journey herself and she understands it, and she has become so interested. I remember her asking me when it took a while from get to customer number 1 or customer number 2, and she said, so Daddy, who are you going to get another customer, or is it? So it's like, hey, I've got a pipeline call with my 5-year-old now, but she gets it, and she's I'm bringing her along as well. So she's very understanding when Daddy's got to take a late call on an evening that we had promised games night, and we still till today do a good job of balancing. And my wife has got a massive career herself.
Yeah.
So it is really, we've got a gigantic Outlook calendar, and everything is calendarized, and we are hyper organized with our blocks of time so that there's no surprises, and we prioritize to the extent possible. But I think it is still a lot of integration.
Yeah. I think the fact of getting up like a couple of hours before everything else happens is such a lifesaver. And I've been lucky that I was doing that before the kid was here. But if I didn't have that 2-hour window or whatever it is before everything happened, sometimes 50% of my work for the day gets done in those couple of hours, because you just laser focused on it, and you can get it all done there.
Yeah, it has, on the flip side, made me a super boring guy to hang out in the evenings, because by 9:30 I need to hit the pillow, so I still need my 7.5 hours of sleep.
I'm
And
with you.
I'm in bed like 10 o'clock is as late as it goes.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, look, super interesting to get your perspectives from everything from starting companies to advice to others on how they can do the same. Where should people go if they want to find out more about you, your company? What's the website? What's the best place to go?
Yeah, so kuvama.com is where you can go to learn about how to move away from selling features to discovering value. On the personal side, I've got a blog called mgmusings.com, where I've penned a few what I think are funny essays that have been stories that I've told many times and finally written them down to friends. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn.
Okay, cool. We'll put links to those on the screen as well. Awesome. But hey, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alfie.
No problem. Cool.
Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching this podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, etc., etc. And I'll see you in the next episode.